So thanks again, Elena, for taking the time. And maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us more about yourself.
Hi, my name is Elena Kmetova Biro, and I am a project manager of the big Life Wild Island project. I work for the Donau-Auen National Park since already 3 years, but I'm not Austrian, I'm Bulgarian. It's actually quite handy for such an international project with 15 partners from 8 countries. It's really great to work in such an international team. Otherwise, my background is I'm an ecologist and I've worked in Bulgaria for other life projects, but for bird conservation. So I've switched from birds to wetlands.
Oh, interesting. What happened? Just wanted to change.
Change of location, yes, but I still felt like I've always wanted to work for conservation and I've always liked wetlands as well. So this was a great opportunity to work for an international project and use my skills for something which I find useful. And something which has always been very important for me is to see the change on the ground. And wetlands are a very, very great example of that because they change so quickly after we intervene.
So maybe you can tell us more about a specific project that you worked or are working on right now.
Yes, I am managing the Life Wild Island project. This is a really great project, one of the biggest European projects of the LIFE funding scheme. We are 15 partners from 8 countries, and we are working from Germany all the way to Romania throughout the Danube. And what we're working for is island conservation, because when we talk about islands, people think about the sea, which is quite nice, but not many people know that there are more than 900 islands along the Danube. And for us, we are using them as an indicator of healthy ecosystems, because they mean that the morphology, the hydrology is near natural, and they support very valuable habitats and species. And we are trying to preserve islands. We're basically preserving natural ecological processes along the Danube. And in the focus of our project, we are restoring 34 islands from Germany all the way down to Romania. And we are trying to address the biggest threats for the Danube habitats, basically the modifications which were caused by hydropower plants and infrastructure related to navigation, which is causing problems, and also change of sediment regimes, as well as the invasive species. So basically, we are doing direct conservation measures, which are tailored to the individual partners. And it's really great to see that such a country and cross-sector project is working, because on the upstream of the Danube, the upstream sections, the problems are more related to regulations of the riverbed. And then going towards the middle Danube, we are facing more problems with sedimentation and regimes. And then going down towards lower Danube, we are facing more problems with invasive species, for example. And this is how our project is dealing with things. So upstream, we're working with embankment removal and groin adaptation to allow lateral connectivity, to allow the river basically decide where to go and how to model its riverbed. We also have some similar activities in the Middle Danube, in Croatia, in Serbia. We are releasing old sidearms, forming new islands, basically, actually restoring islands that have been lost because of sedimentation and regulation. And downstream, we're also doing quite a lot for supporting forest habitats, removing invasive species and helping the nature basically take care of itself. So we are counting on non-intervention management. We don't try to control the river. We're actually trying to let the river does all the work, removing all the obstacles, all the embankments, all the infrastructure, and let the nature take its course.
Sounds like a very big and ambitious project in the end.
And for me, one of the most interesting aspects of the project is that it's really cross-sector cooperation, because we have not only nature protection authorities in the project, but we also have hydropower companies, we have navigation companies, and we have profit-oriented forestry organizations, which is great that basically through a nature conservation project like this, we are having all these different institutions Danube-wide on board thinking about conservation. So we not only have change on site with new sidearms, new islands, new forest patches, but we also have change in the way people think about nature and rivers and conservation, which I think is really a fundamental benefit from the project.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things to get the different stakeholders together. I was wondering, how did you do this? How did you get the hydropower people on board as well as navigation, conservation people?
Yes, I think we are trying to create win-win situations and show them the point of nature conservation and river restoration activities. Generally speaking, big companies like big hydropower companies, they do have the obligations for compensation measures. And this is a very, how to say, low-hanging fruit, a easy way to get them on board, showing them something meaningful that can be done through their investments, because they have to do it anyway, but they can do it in a wrong way. They can do it in the way that is the most environmentally friendly. And we as experts, as nature protected managers, can give solutions or develop together solutions which are on one side beneficial for the ecosystems and the restoration, on the other side accepted by the sectors, because navigation, and this is why I really think it's our project has a lot of best case examples that downstream or different institutions can take over. Because, for example, in Austria, the navigation authorities are by law required to look after nature, and for them is a part of their obligations. So this was great support, and they're always a very reliable partner of ours. And then moving downstream to the Balkans, and especially Bulgaria, Romania, it's very difficult to get them on board. So it's always great to be able to show a working example. And for example, one of our measures that was just our first big construction measure that was finished was on Erebe Island on Hungary, where they opened an old groin and restored sidearm, which was completely silted. So for me, it was amazing to see that a place that I could cross was a path is now full of water, and you have to have a boat to go along it. It was a really amazing experience. But I remember when we were discussing the technical plans and their engineers were there showing us, they were really conservative. And they said, if we let more water in the sidearm, we're going to have damage on the water navigation course. And of course, Hungary has obligations to maintain, just as all the other countries. And they were really conservative. They said, no, we cannot allow more water in. So what we did was inviting them over to Austria, because the situation is quite similar in terms of speed of the water, morphological conditions. It's still the same section of the Danube. And we showed them solutions that already worked, which I think inspired them and made them a bit braver. It's still not the optimal solutions from our side, but it's much more than it was originally planned. And I think it worked because of showing an example. And I believe that when they see on the long run that the navigation route was not impacted from the restoration measures, they will gain even more courage. And the next thing they're going to do will be even braver and more ambitious, and with an even greater impact. It's a really wonderful example of cross-sector communication, and the simple fact of having so many different people from different education and experience, cultures, languages sitting together and planning is a wonderful experience, I have to say, and it has worked really, really well together. And I think one of the biggest necessities or requirement is this mutual trust and understanding. Because if somebody says, like, is strict on it, is very intolerant, or doesn't want to see the other point of view, it can never work. But for a river, especially for the most international river in the world, there is really no other way than sitting and working together, cross sectors and cross borders, because we are all sharing it. We all need the water and the services that ecosystems are giving us. So I would say everyone is interested in that conservation.
Yeah, and you mentioned like one of the challenges you experienced was overcome by showing best practice in Austria to the Hungarians, for example. Did you experience any other challenges when implementing the project?
Um, The biggest challenge of the project is the way that it works with very long technical planning, because it has to be in many cases you need some modeling and planning to show the authorities and obtain the relevant permits, especially when in the sections where the river is used for navigation for hydropower. This is clear. And then these are very, very long processes of getting these permissions and starting to work on site. So this has been the biggest challenge. Unfortunately, as always, I don't think is new for anybody's inflation and financial issues, because the way that our projects work is they are developed 1 year, then we are applying for funding, waiting for 1 year, then we are starting this 7 year long project. And by the time we are starting the constructions on site, the prices have changed immensely. And this is always a challenge for the partners. And I'm very grateful that everybody is very making a real effort to achieve what has been planned. And this is very much because they see the point and they're highly motivated to do it. Like whatever has been planned, it's a real struggle and effort that it gets realized. But fortunately, it's really running.
So talking about the funding, um, because it's a so the overall project is a live project,
Yes.
and then you have these smaller, like creating islands again, or doing these measures
Restoration
to
sections, yes.
restoration sections,
Yes.
and these ones are not funded through the live project. The
No,
planning
no,
is
these are actions within the LIFE project.
okay.
And
Okay.
actually, one of the biggest, it's quite interesting also to work with the technical planners, because when we say that we are a project for conservation, for restoring islands, they are very fixed on keeping the island, while we are seeing the island as something natural and indicator of dynamics. So for us, if the island disappears, but appears 1 kilometer downstream,
Mhm.
it's the most natural thing that can happen. So we are not fixed on having stable islands. We are fixed on giving the river the dynamics again to decide in a natural way where should sedimentation form islands, or if there is a high water that the island disappears. And this is the type of dynamic that riparian habitats need. This is a very specific environment. All the species that are related to this kind of habitats are dependent on this kind of dynamic. So they are adjusted to high water periods, then low water, then dry areas, then sandbanks, gravel, and all these habitats. They are highly dependent on the availability of water and then the disappearance of the water, which is hard to explain this to a planner, because your project is called Wild Islands, so they're very fixed. Because it's very easy. Some of these islands are formed because of the navigation infrastructure. When the groin is set, then through the time, the river is bringing sediment and the islands form. This is not a very natural process, because islands would typically form when the river is making curves or changes of inclinations and things like this. So we really don't want to keep islands. We want to promote them as indicators of natural processes. And this has always been a quite nice challenge, I would have to say, because sometimes the navigation sector is also very interested in keeping the islands because they make the water stay in the navigable course of the river. But this is not what we want. What we want is bringing water and dynamics into the system to help the natural riparian ecosystems and softwood forests. Because if we fix an island, the softwood is gradually replaced by hardwood forest, which is also valuable. But riparian habitats are one of the most threatened European habitats because of such a big pressure. And what was really always fascinated me is if we are on a boat on the Danube and you look around both sides, you see such wonderful forests, and you don't realize they're so thin. The strips around the river, the buffer area is really, really thin, and these habitats are under huge pressure from agriculture all over, because these are the alluvial areas of the river that are the best for agriculture throughout the entire course of the river. So these small patches of softwood forests are getting more and more threatened, and are extremely valuable at the same time. So we are trying to promote this habitat and their natural development and hopefully expansion, which is very, very challenging though, because with the embankment, especially in this infrastructure, this cuts the water movement towards the floodplain areas. and the forests are drying out or being replaced with species which are more fit for drier conditions, which is not what we want. We want the water back. And this is not only us, because agriculture is also facing difficulties because of the sinking of the underground water levels. And if we restore these connections and these natural sidearms and movement of the water, this is also great for the underwater niveaus as well for flood protection, because riparian forests, riparian areas, they are the best natural water storage, water retention reservoir, which was formed naturally and is being cut. And then we're facing the problems that we have seen, unfortunately, in the Czech Republic, in Austria, and Germany, the last couple of years with very, very big flooding events, and especially with the climate change, we are starting to already see impacts, effects, and we think that wetland restoration and this riparian restoration will play a key role for resilience, for people's lives and livelihood, not only for ecosystems and species, because it's always hard to win people talking about birds. Although I love birds, I'm myself a keen bird watcher, but it's much easier to convince people that these kind of forests are needed for water retention, for floods protection, not only because they're nice to walk around.
At what stage is your project right now?
We are at the middle. So most of the planning has been finished. Many of the permissions have been obtained, and we expect in 2025 most of the on-site measures to also start, because these, you can imagine, these are quite expensive things. We're talking about buggers entering and removing huge volumes of riprap, which is the stone blocking the entire bank of the river, or opening groins. And what I've always found fascinating is I can only imagine how much it have costed to build these canals and all these embankment and all this infrastructure. And I'm absolutely convinced when this was done several hundreds of years ago, people thought this is the best they can do at the time. And I find it somewhat sad that 100 years later, we realize that this cutting of the riverbed from the adjacent areas is actually fatal for the ecosystems and for us as users of the services. And now we have to spend just as much money to remove all of this that has been unfortunately done.
So now talking about general aspects of the project, because it sounds very like Danube specific. I mean, the Danube is big and there are local and regional differences, definitely. But do you think there's anything that's transferable to other regions or other river basins?
Very much so, yes. And islands, the riparian islands are not only characteristic for the Danube. And there are several other big rivers in Europe, for example, Rhine, which is under even greater pressure from hydropower navigation. And Rhine has also a huge amount of islands. And we believe that this is a great approach to conserve nature and to promote near natural processes, not only along the Danube, that can serve as a great example, but be taken over to the other big European rivers. And we are also trying, within our LIFE project, we established a Danube Wild Island Ramsar regional initiative to get more of a political impact and acknowledgement, if you wish, be able to promote us even more and serve as a great example. We are in very active connection with other colleagues, and we are trying to promote these kind of measures. And there are several other projects which are doing very similar things inspired by these best practices. Like there is a huge potential on the Mura, Danube, Drava, trilateral, it's going to be pentalateral protected area. We are working actively with the colleagues there. We're working with Rhine, with Sava. And yes, we think we can manage to be a very good example, and especially considering the recent EU nature conservation policy, which have set very, very ambitious goals. Like they want 30% of the terrestrial area of Europe under protection. They want to see 25,000 kilometers of free rivers, which I find extremely inspiring and great. And I think that we can show other colleagues and stakeholders how this can be done, especially using the Danube as a river which is under huge pressure. It is a big river, and it is suffering from a lot of different impacts you can imagine. And for us, it's again a bit of a low-hanging fruit, because islands are not an object of very huge interest. I mean, there are foresters that are using them for forestry, hybrid poplars and stuff. There are fishermen or hunters, but apart of that, it's not really something that creates very much interest. And conserving islands, we can also increase the number of protected areas, inspire people to do something for restoration and natural hydrological processes. And this is really interesting. For example, there was a local issue between Croatia and Serbia. Whose are the islands? And we say, well, these are wild islands, so it doesn't really matter. None of the countries can do anything, so let's call them just wild islands. It's even in the way that they are called, like they have codes, and you can tell if they belong to one country or another. In this case, there was an inventory done, and there is some classification. They're classified in 3 classes, ones which are near natural, 153, which are very pristine, as much as they can be along such a highly modified ecosystem. There are other big proportion of islands under pressure, which, however, can be restored to a better ecological condition. And unfortunately, there's also class C islands, which are under heavy use, be it for forestry or because of hydropower navigations, which would be difficult to restore. But at least we have some concept and ideas how to move forward and bring improvement on the ground. And again, use them to as indicators and not be fixed on their island conservation per se. We are trying to conserve the processes and not the state.
You were able to convince them these are wild islands and they don't belong to any of the countries.
It's still, as far as I understand from the colleagues, the dialogue is still going on, but it's highly likely, because wild island is a very non-threatening name, so you don't need to have it to assign it to one country. So it might be possible to have a political breakthrough and have wild islands instead of Croatian or Serbian islands, and I find this quite inspiring. Because this means that both countries acknowledge the fact that some of the islands should be left without any impact, and they're just wild islands, and they're wild islands for everybody.
Yeah, nice. Maybe to come to an end, in summary, do you have any key messages for those facing restoration challenges that you would like to share?
I think one of the key things is to be open and communicate the significance of wetlands as much as possible, because we really have to explain in a very detailed way why are they important and how their services are something we utterly need, especially in the face of climate change. And what I feel absolutely crucial for our work is this cross-border and cross-sector cooperation, because unless we all sit together in one table and talk about compromises and joint solutions, it is never going to work. And we are in such political environment right now. The world is changing, is separating, but nature unites us all, because we all need nature in the same way, and we can only change things when we work together and we are on the same table.
Thank you, Elena, for this interview.
Thank you for the interest.